that stress you have when you're starting something up, and every deal is precious and every client's precious, and how you interact with everybody on that level. I just look at that as my everyday. And I don't think my wife loves that, but it's a self-inflicted pressure to perform. And so the challenge, I think everybody in real estate who's got tenants right now, is feeling it. We're feeling some pressure, but we're figuring out ways as a group of people to perform.
This is the real estate investing experience. We get it. Real estate can be rough sometimes, and that's why we bring in the experts to talk about the experiences you won't hear anywhere else. With your hosts, John Cohen and Chris Grinzik.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Investing Experience. I'm your host, Chris Grinzik. With me, as always, is John Cohen. How are we doing?
We are good. I said it earlier. So when these podcasts come out, I think we've picked a buyer on a property. So it was a really good set of interviews. I think we have our buyer picked. Now I'm sure Donald will change his mind 30 times, but right now we have a buyer pick. So we're hopefully get this one to the finish line today.
Yeah, that's good. That's good to hear. So it's interesting. Things have started to open back up the last month or two. Things are starting to progress a little bit more. Curious if that's going to continue or if things are going to abruptly change and shut back down. I was just looking, SUNY Oneonta just had like a surge of cases and they just shut back down for like 2 weeks, and they're going through the whole thing with NYU where they're delivering the worst meals I've ever seen. There's one with like an apple and it's like the whole bottom is rotten out. And I was like,
I saw so the University of Alabama had 1,200 positive cases.
Jesus.
And then there was an article this morning saying how that like really the younger kids and, not only babies, but all the way up to like 20-year-olds are new studies, right? There's a new study every day, but that it's like the silent spreaders. And that's why it's like, okay, it's going in a very positive trend for some places, but now kids are in school and kids are out. And I had a conversation with a buddy of mine the other day. There's a college in Dallas that's not even testing. They don't even care. So it's, these are things that you just can't change. You put 50,000 kids into a school, you don't think they're going to party and do some shit they're not supposed to do. I mean, it's inevitable. I mean, you would have told my 20-year-old self not to do anything, I guarantee you I would have been doing stupid shit.
Yes, I know you definitely would have been doing all the wrong things.
Without a doubt.
I probably would have been doing some, probably not as bad as you, but would love to see a 20-year-old John Cohen going on now.
Oh, they'd be disastrous. I can tell you that.
Yeah, that's for sure. But awesome. Let's jump into today's episode. Got a great guest on today, doing some similar stuff as us in the multifamily space, but doing a little bit different. So really interested to hear his journey, his experience, and some of the things that have been going on in his world, and kind of talk through it and have a really great conversation. So with that being said, John Carney, thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah. So you want to just kick things off a couple minutes, just tell everybody a little bit about you, your background, your journey, and what you're doing?
Sure. I come from a multi-generational real estate family here in Cleveland, Ohio. So, in the early years, I was on the maintenance crew at shopping centers and then in the labor union on warehouse conversion projects, and then kind of got a taste of leasing and marketing and sales for downtown Cleveland apartments, just out of college. But I moved out to Colorado and eventually got into my own real estate gigs and was away from Cleveland for 19 years and rejoined the business full time in 2016. The Landmark Companies is my father's a founder and his partner, Robert Raines. They're both attorneys by trade. It can be a dirty word for some people, but these guys are transactional, right? Mm-hmm. And you learn a lot from transactional attorneys that like to get deals done, as opposed to the other attorneys that, like to just run up the bill. So, they're developers by heart, and they've been playing the real estate game for a long time. And I have been fortunate enough to be around them and learn from them. But so Landmark, we own 350 apartments across two buildings on West 9th Street in Cleveland's historic warehouse district. And, they were two of the original buildings that went up in volume in the 90s, the landmark companies and the efforts that my dad and his partner, Bob, were involved in, really did bring people into downtown Cleveland back in the 90s. It's that real estate entrepreneur planting the flag in an area and then, cycling through some projects. We recently sold the remaining units in a project that underwent a condominium conversion and at the worst time possible, right? 2007. And, I listed and was able to successfully find a buyer to take out the remaining interest a few months ago, which was incredible given the time that we're in right now. That was in May of 2020. We're in August. So, we in 2017 we acquired 167 units on Cleveland's lakefront at East 55th Street in a building called the Shoreline Apartments. Actually, 167 minus 29. That was the value add. We converted a second floor parking garage into 29 new units, and lakefront living, a unique piece of property. Right now, we're looking at developing some another ground up community that'll be adjacent to the shoreline on 4.5 acres, and that'll be a new build, 214 units, which we're hoping to see. We're working with the city right now during a lockdown on final details. It took almost 18 months plus to get the land locked up. And now that we own that, we're looking at, getting going, sooner than later, but sooner, maybe January, and later, maybe, this time next year. We're just working as hard as we can on that. And Landmark has one other asset in downtown Indianapolis. That's the block apartment building. It's 163 units and some commercial space right there connected to, it's right in the middle of downtown Indianapolis. So if you've ever been there, you drop a pin. It's right by, the public square. So
awesome.
That keeps us busy. That's it in a nutshell, about what I'm doing in the multifamily game right now.
Mm-hmm. Do you guys get involved in any other spaces, or that's primarily the focus?
With that business, that's the focus. I'm involved in some ground up developments outside of the landmark companies with our family. One on the west side of Cleveland, which is going to be high-end apartments. I have a real estate license right now. I'm helping a new client who was referred to me do a 1031 exchange, and we're looking at a 5-unit small multifamily property for that family. They're out of state and with family ties here. And so I do a few deals like that once in a while with my broker, and I list our business's commercial spaces. So, believe it or not, we've got 2 restaurants looking at leasing commercial spaces for us right now.
Interesting. So if I understand correctly, I just want to clarify, Landmark is a family company, or it's your family and a business partner?
It's a 2-family business.
Two-family business.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
That, they call it the landmark companies. Each property is slightly different in its ownership group, but the management, right? So the landmark companies is the property manager and controls that decision-making, right? So we run the property managers and the leasing and the maintenance side of the house. That's all kept in-house.
Gotcha. Was this a company that was established when you were growing up as a kid, or is this more recent than that?
No, it started in 1990 when I was in high school. Mm-hmm. And then, the first project in downtown Cleveland was the Grand Arcade. For people who might be tuning in from Cleveland, you go back to the 90s, right? We had down on the river, you had the Flats, which has reinvented himself.
Mm-hmm.
That was like underage drinking and partying, late 80s, early 90s style, right? From the hair bands into the grunge. I saw them all. I saw Pearl Jam in a bar the size of my office, and it's not a big office.
Yeah.
and so then when the warehouse district, which was just up the hill, the bank on the west or on the east side of the river where the city is, that's the warehouse district, which was desolate. I mean, if you wanted to speak frankly, the first project, the Grand Arcade, was the old city mission. And, it had the liquor store, it had the porn shop, it had the thrift store. That's what was there. And in over 20 years, it's completely changed itself. And so is Cleveland, and so is market rent apartments. I mean, they're going gangbusters right now. And, we're all sitting back saying, luckily we're not in a lease up right now because it's a competitive market and we are battling for every lease we get right now. And that's kind of a reality of our city at the moment.
Mm-hmm. So I find it incredibly fascinating hearing you talk for the last, 6, 7, 8 minutes, and the difference in the way you've spoken about your journey and experience compared to so many other people. And the difference is that you are in the city for decades. And the way you talk about the city and what's happened and how it relates to the real estate is so fascinating to me, because so many people that we talk to are very similar to John and I, of doing it in multiple markets or out of state or out of area. And the way in which you talk about where you're invested and the area and the history of it is vastly different than how John or I would ever talk about a market. And I think it's one of the things that I've realized a lot recently of how hyper local real estate is. And there's this growing trend over the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years with the internet of this rise of the ease and feasibility of investing in an area that's not your backyard, where, before the internet, you just had to invest where you lived, basically, because it's where you lived. It wasn't, you couldn't buy something halfway around the world nearly as easily as you could today. And for me, it's incredible to hear you listen to talk about these things that we would never talk about.
Well, here's what's really interesting, Chris, is let's look at what happened in that window. I went out to Colorado because that was instead of going to law school, I went to Vail, Colorado for a year, which turned into 12. But it's tough to make a living out there. Okay. So you were doing all sorts of different jobs. And I got into some real estate markets like in Idaho, in some other areas where, you're not at the highest end possible. Mm-hmm. And then, went into a business importing timber and furniture and other goods from Indonesia, got into some in real estate deals there. I met an Australian. I'm trying to make this super short and sharp. Love story. Ended up moving to Australia in 2009. I was there for 7 years. I lived in Melbourne, super hot real estate market at the time. America's falling apart. I'm scratching my head saying, how is this possible? But they're rising. And the business that I ended up being a founder of with some local partners was America Property Source. And that's how I really got into the transactional side and the sales side of real estate in general, by enabling Australian investors to, and I say safely, because we had a great team of people who were uber transparent and weren't pulling the wool over people's eyes, to safely, multiply their wealth in the Phoenix and Atlanta housing market, right? But my team was the team of folks that I trusted, and I was doing deals with them, and my clients were doing deals with them. And we weren't the largest group doing this in Australia at the time, but we were the most expensive. If you wanted to work with our group, we charged the most because we had limited resources, right? We had a small group of people on the ground in Australia that understood America. And so we thought the value that we brought to the table. And we were successful. Now, the Aussie dollar dropped in around 2014, 15, and the deals became harder and harder to find. It made less and less sense. So we had that window of opportunity. I transitioned into a partnership over down south of Melbourne on the Surf Coast with a builder and a real estate developer who financed me. And we did some single family home new construction stuff. Then I was invited back to an opportunity in Cleveland for a property that we did not end up getting, but was bought by cash by a small real estate investor who owns all of Detroit by the name of Dan Gilbert. And he's bringing that building online now. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of like the trying to be conscious of the time and say, like, I was I'm now always in startup mode when I look at everything. It's just because that stress you have when you're starting something up, and every deal's precious and every client's precious, and how you interact with everybody on that level. I just look at that as my everyday. And I don't think my wife loves that, but it's a self-inflicted pressure to perform. And so the challenge, I think everybody in real estate who's got tenants right now, is feeling it. We're feeling some pressure, but we're figuring out ways as a group of people to perform with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting, and it's great to hear more of your journey, hopping around. So how did you end up coming from Australia and all these other places and coming back and working for what you're doing now? Was it just, hey, I want to, come back and work with the family, or, what was that process like?
Yeah, there was a bit of wanting to spend some time in my formative years, right? I'm in my mid 40s, right? In this stage of life with some experience, right? You come back to our family business, you have to bring something to the table. I felt I had value, and I was invited back to work on a project. Now, we worked on that project for almost over a year and were unsuccessful. But when that door closed, a new door opened, right? And so, I went from working on what I'm going to call smaller development projects to pretty big development projects. I feel that the stuff I did on my own enabled me to, be a fly on the wall and absorb rapidly the difference between the two. When you're sitting in a room with a lot of investment bankers and the capital stack is a little bit more complex, but at the end of the day, you're doing the same. You're after the same result, I suppose, for sale houses or for rent, multifamily, in value adding, is the common thread. So right now we've got some exciting projects on the horizon, and whether Landmark grows, and it would grow by acquiring and developing, and on the side, I work with select investors to help them kind of get into Cleveland, in the Cleveland investment market with my broker and her team, because it's a trust game. You guys are in the same business. I mean, you raise capital from people. You've got a great reputation, and you want to make sure that your investors are well looked after and sane, because I'm sure you guys have both seen what happens when folks aren't well looked after.
Yeah.
No,
so,
right.
No, definitely.
The other side of the coin is it ain't a fun place to be. That's for sure.
So, I think that's why we all jump on podcasts and share these great experiences, is because we want to make sure that people understand where the traps are. And, I've stepped in plenty of them.
Yeah. So I am curious, you were in Australia and investing in other markets. I believe you said Atlanta and Phoenix, and maybe you did other areas. How do you view investing in your backyard like Cleveland for, decades versus, people investing out of state in other markets? Do you have a preference of one over the other? Is it just pros and cons of each? Like, how do you view that now, having done both?
Well, you got to look at the market, and there's a lot of big family real estate, multifamily real estate and development businesses here in Cleveland that are looking at markets down south. So it's a matter of travel time, bandwidth, time, energy, and treasure, right? But I think that we do feel is a business that we understand our market and our community. The project we have in the pipeline, we'll call it the Shoreline Extension, is a large project. It's a large time and capital intensive new construction project. And we're not looking to be, our exit strategy isn't a REIT or a publicly listed company. We're still going to remain a small family business. And you kind of look at, retaining these assets over time, and, a hand down from one generation to the next will inevitably happen. But, in real estate, that's sort of in a nutshell where I see it right now. Always open for opportunities, and always looking and always talking to people. The limitation being, money, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. So do you think you, as a family, as you look at real estate, are there different things that you look for in markets and in properties that you think is very different to somebody who isn't looking for ownership for decades or creating wealth for decades? Like, do you guys look at certain things differently? Do you look for different metrics? Are you looking at different opportunities than a typical real estate investor, or is it still a lot of the same stuff?
No, I think it's pretty similar. If you were to so I'll just speak for my father. He's a buy and hold until I die, which means forever, right? I'm not necessarily I don't necessarily have that. I always want to have the exit plan up front. And sometimes, you've just got to get started in a project to really clearly define that. But right now, the development side, here's the formula. You develop it. There's an incentive through development fees and in part in project management fees. That's how developers typically get paid. Mm-hmm. And then, there's leasing up a multifamily asset and then managing that over time. Right. And so there's a lot of different ways in any stage of the game where you can, there's an incentive to stay. But I mean, the development side is a core point of Landmark. They developed all the properties that they own or developed something in the properties that they owned. So that's the value add that I believe all investors are generally looking for. And then, the timing of the exit, we're not in a hurry. And we'll see how Cleveland does in reinventing itself. Cities take some time, but as far as is Cleveland, Ohio, the best place to invest in the United States or in the world? I don't know. There's a lot of investors from both coasts come here and internationally because they like the returns. But I think if you have the right team on the ground in any market, your backyard's a great place to start.
Yeah, no, I think that last point I couldn't agree with you more. I think too many people are too quick to go outside their backyard and look for other markets as a way to find exactly what they're looking for. I think oftentimes it's an excuse to not be in your own market or do it in your backyard, or, too much, so you don't want to put in the work to find something that actually works. The level of insight and knowledge that you and your family have in a market that you've grown up in and invested in and been involved in for the last 20, 30 years is invaluable compared to somebody who is coming in from out of state or has only done it for a few years. The level of detail and knowledge that you guys have is, it's almost incalculable compared to somebody who doesn't have that, because you're going to have an intimate knowledge of what's going on and what can and can't be done and what other players in the area are thinking and where you see things possibly going. And you may not invest on, ifs and possibles, but at least you have an idea of things that are going on significantly more than somebody brand new from California deciding I'm going to invest in Cleveland, Ohio because I like it for these reasons.
Generally the people from California come here because they like it because you get so much more for your money. But then, the other side of that is there's plenty of people investing in California. There's always a way to figure it out. And then, so, it's the entrepreneur that in me says there's an opportunity everywhere, and it's about cracking the code. And a big part of that, something that I'm just, always talk about, is the team of people you have. And, find the team of people you have. Mm-hmm. And so I wouldn't want anyone in the audience to think, the guys so my dad and his partner, Bob, they've been doing this for 50 years, but they get feedback from all sorts of people, from their era, from my era, and in between, who have vastly more experience than them. That is like the takeaway here is they don't make decisions without thinking about it and getting feedback from their team, right? Their legal team, their accounting team, the finance team. And it's not just we have one group of people looking at numbers and underwriting and looking at refinancing, and they all know it. We go with a couple different people, and when we take all the data, all the options on board, right, with past people that have helped us be successful. And that boils down to whether you're just starting or if your goal's 20,000 doors in a public exit, great. It's the same kind of. You still need to be surrounded by great people, I believe.
Mm-hmm. So how do you go about finding those people? Because I think that's one of the things you probably work on, and you've said you've built up a team, and especially as you acquire units for the families or the business. How do you go about finding the right people to support your goals?
Well, I think you've got two teams when you're talking about multifamily or commercial real estate, right? You've got your internal team, right? The people that work within the business. Then you have your kind of business to business partners. And I have just found in multiple countries and multiple markets that if you find a great real estate specific accountant They are generally connected to a good real estate specific attorney. And if you like one of those guys, you're probably going to get along with both of them, right? Birds of a feather and personality types. And then, they're going to know the lenders, the title agents, the property managers. I mean, you really start with finding that one professional in a market, whether it's a commercial real estate agent or another developer, or someone that you're referred to that might be working in Texas, for example. I mean, I know a handful of people that are down in Texas. I mean, it wouldn't be difficult, but I think the more that you engage your own network and you have conversations with people, if you zero in on those professional services, which are going to be critical to your success, everything eventually falls into place.
I say that all the time. Successful real estate investors, whether you're doing it in your backyard or not, the more people you know and the more people you can reach out to for help, the better you're going to be, whether it's getting a problem fixed or solving a problem that you're trying to figure out. But like you said, if I know someone, I have a handful of friends that I can call in certain areas and say, hey, do you have a good attorney you could refer me to? Do you have a good, agent I can speak to about a sub-market? And, going into it blind makes it a lot more challenging. So, but just using the networks and people and putting a feeler out to get a referral or help or a question answered, that's the name of the game. And obviously, that's where more, people have more success when they're doing something not in their backyard, but being in your backyard and your family and having that relationship. I'm sure that helps a lot, but knowing that you can pick up the phone and make a call probably also helps to figure out a problem if one were to arise.
Yeah, I agree 100% with you, John. And for some reason, I gravitate towards if the answer to the question of who should I go seek out first, I'd say an accountant.
Mm-hmm.
Because
no, 100%. I think it's just, people ask, even on finding deals, right? There's the way that everyone, you have your direct mail and your cold calling and your agents, and you can go online, you can go on the internet. Those are all great. You can go to networking events, but there's other ways too, right? Accountants and lawyers see a lot of stuff. They're huge resources because an accountant sees a lot of transactions just because they're doing the numbers. They may be able to help you because they see that. They also see where your legal documents are coming from. They see it all. Accountants are huge. So if you could have a good relationship or build off, you should use them, to your advantage as a great foundation piece to whatever you're looking to accomplish, because they see a lot of stuff. They see deals that are going wrong. They see deals that are going well, and they can help facilitate that really well. But you got to find the right way to ask the question. When you seek out accountants, or when using an accountant as a pillar to whatever you're looking to accomplish, is there something that you go about or recommend go about when you ask them a question, so you don't just come off as someone asking for something and more of how I can help you, can you help me?
Well, I learned this lesson the hard way in Australia when I had a small business accountant looking after my small business needs and real estate needs. And then my tax bill came and, a great year turned out to be not so great. Needed a new accountant. And then went out and started talking to people, and it turns out that my wife's accountant was not only into small business, but more specifically into real estate. And then I had a complex issue with, borrowing money from myself overseas and making sure everything flowed across borders, documented, and not to leave a I undotted or a T uncrossed, right? And so that led me to getting advice from some other groups of people who specified in U.S. and in Australian tax law, and kind of putting a solution together that was agreed to by my accountant. Does that make sense? So that's when accounting and accountants became. It wasn't just about wealth creation. It was also about wealth preservation. That was the trigger point and the lesson I learned the hard way. Then when I moved back to Cleveland, I didn't have an accountant on my team. It was recommended that I use, who the family used. But that guy is great for maybe like where my dad was, and they have this relationship and play golf. But he wasn't right for me because he wasn't as accessible as I wanted. So I networked my way in to some financial advisors and some other consultants who I was being introduced to when I moved back to the right person who's specific to real estate and sort of family business, multi-generation family real estate businesses. And so that's where I landed. we're in the same age group, and we'll have a long relationship going forward. Did I answer your question? But
I think you did. It's, just because you get the answer that you may think is right, you got to realize, you got to find that right person. I think you did that. That's a phenomenal job explaining it to someone on how they can, just because you get a referral from your dad doesn't mean that person works well for you. And just by going down the rabbit hole and figuring out the right ask for the seat, for lack of a better way of putting it, it helps, right? And the hard mistakes are the ones that hurt the most, but you probably learn the most from those mistakes. And I'm a big believer in that if you try and be perfect, you can do it. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but being rough and tumble and being a bull in a china closet, there's nothing wrong with that either, right? Like that, you learn the hard way. You might get some bumps and bruises, but those mistakes probably weigh more on your mind and say, okay, I'm not going to make that again. And I know that I got to go about it this way. So I think you did a great job explaining it to listeners who may have that same question of how do I go and find the right person if I don't know where to start? Well, you got to unturn a rock and figure it out, right? And then start asking the right questions.
Yeah. And that I lost a lot of money by not having my accounting organized. So there you go. And that's generally when you gotta, that those are the hard lessons. So I mean, you guys are out finding deals. Are you finding most of your deals where you're the GP? Are you finding those off market? Or are you finding them through your network of agents? How are you guys getting them?
I would say we see them every single way. We buy a ton of deals with brokers, whether they're on market, off market. Off market is a quote unquote off market because in 2020, I don't know how many off market deals there are, right? Even if you're talking directly to a seller, it doesn't mean he's not going to talk to somebody else. But we've bought deals through our management companies. We've bought deals through wholesalers. We've bought deals from brokers. So we've done it all. We've bought from extremely difficult sellers that are very difficult to transact with. And typically we're looking for issues or problems or ways that we can add value to a seller's situation, whether it's closing quickly, closing all cash, making it easy, using their contracts because they don't want to negotiate. Based on pricing, that's where we've been able to provide a lot of value, just working with difficult people and finding deals in different areas, right? Not just calling a Cushman Wakefield or a CBRE broker, getting a broker blast, and then getting into best and final, which we've done. But that's not where our best deals have come from. And that's just, you just got to try a lot of stuff. For the most part, we see a ton of deals and we buy a fraction of them. So if you're just waiting for the broker, you can wait a long time, or you can buy something that may not be what you want, or it may be perfect, but the returns are a little bit less. But we see a ton of deals from all different angles, and then we just pick the one that we believe to be the best at the time the situation is presented to us.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the off market is not the buzzword it may have been, right? Because look, if you have a good team of people bird dogging, just because they're commercial agents doesn't, that they're just as good as anybody, especially and should be able to help zero in on what you want. I mean, you guys, is there a market? We've talked a lot about Cleveland. You guys are started in New York. I see that you're in Columbus and down south. I mean, what are you guys thinking? Are you moving west or are you staying east?
It's a good question. I think the big thing for us, fundamentally is what right now doesn't help is job growth. Right now, there's a lot of jobs going away. Job growth is huge, right? Columbus has been absolutely crazy with job growth. The South has been, based anywhere in the South has experienced ridiculous job growth and population growth. So we're looking for areas that are growing. We're looking for areas that are, bringing jobs in. We're looking for areas that people want to move to, and then fundamentally supply and demand. So, we want to see locations where whether it's either really tough to build, it's expensive to build, or there's not much building, or if there is a lot of building, there's the economics are in our favor, right? We don't ever want to be in an area where nobody's moving, there are no jobs, and there's a ton of development. Not that you'd ever find that location, but that's not where we, want to be. I don't mind going west. I don't mind going south. Big thing for us, I think you mentioned it earlier, travel. There's something to be said about proximity and how long and how much of a pain it is. the ass it is to get to places. So I think that we're going to be, capped from the standpoint of, I don't want to sit on a 6-hour plane ride and go to the West Coast and then have to wait 2-3 days, 4 days there and then coming home, because that's not what my preference is. Not saying it's bad, right, wrong, or indifferent, but for the most part, if we can experience, job growth, population growth, and good supply and demand, those are markets where we want to be. We typically like a little bit of a bigger market because you just typically get more going on there as opposed to some tertiary areas. We have been very successful in tertiary areas, but, being where we are in this market, we've steered away from them. Not that we won't ever go back into them, but right now we're looking for a little bit more fundamentally sound, where there may be some more runway left, where, a lot of these markets have experienced, just 10 years of just an absolute ridiculous uptick in real estate sales and volume and transactions. We just want to be a little bit more aware of that. But for the most part, we're not tied to a location or not. We can be a little bit flexible.
Yeah, and it's just interesting because you're more places than we are, and it's just what's happening, in Cleveland is I wouldn't consider Cleveland a growth market. Statistically, it's not, but young professionals seem to be, the people that grew up here, and now I'm part of that envelope. If you'd asked me 10 years ago, I'd be like, "You kidding me? I'm moving back to Colorado if I ever move back to America." But I'm here now, and I've been around for 4.5 years, and I've been able to observe how different neighborhoods, like ring neighborhoods of the city, are blowing up, and a lot of it's due to some real smart multifamily entrepreneurs that have planted the flag and are just moving people around. So from our standpoint, there's more competition, and that makes our the job of attracting people and making sure our market rent product is to the standard it needs to be to compete. But I think reputation of a small family management company helps us out. But that's not to say that there's others just like that, like us there. But it is interesting, the Cleveland market, because there are big, Amazon came in and brought a ton of jobs with their distribution centers, but they did that everywhere. Our hospital system in the medical technology sector and the banking sector seems to be attracting more people. Do you find that in Columbus? Like, what are the main drivers in Columbus? Because even though it's an hour and a half away or 2 hours away, I'm unfamiliar with the market. And you guys,
yeah. So Columbus sort of checks off a lot of boxes. You have no job sector has more than 18% of the market share. So you have a very diverse economy. So you have, state capital. You obviously always have that. You have Ohio State, which is a huge driver of not only kids and education, but, there's a ton of brands that are headquartered there as well. So you have like that whole north side where there's a ton of jobs in all, retail, healthcare. Amazon has places everywhere. But for the most part, you have that major diversification. The population is growing. It's been growing for quite some time, where I think in early 2010, 2012, it's probably less than 800,000 people there. And now they're pushing, well over 1 million, and, projections to be 2 million. So it's a huge place. It's also a pretty central hub. So you have a ton of logistics as well. So you have a ton of logistic companies because you have such a good central location from the East Coast, from the West Coast. You have good, it's a good landing spot. So you have a ton of that, and your proximity to other major markets in the Midwest is great. Hour and a half to Cleveland, a couple hours to Indianapolis. You can go south, north, east, west, and you're going to touch on a lot of other major cities. So you also have there's a lot of building going on, but there's been a lot of gentrification. But even with that, a market like Cleveland may not statistically check off boxes. I think this is where, people have to look in their backyard. You can see, one part of town that was just a war zone, and it happened in New York, all over the place, where you look at Brooklyn and it's like, I would be a little scared going there 20 years ago. Now, it looks like it's the hottest, hippest place in the world. And I know that's happened in certain markets in Cleveland where, yes, it may not statistically check off every box, but if that's your backyard and you can find a nice gentrifying area or really good location, and right here hasn't been touched yet, that's sort of where you're going to find some really good, unique opportunities in backyards. Whether it's tough or not, every single market out there today is tough. And, everyone's looking for the easy way out, and people don't realize that. But, if I'm talking about Columbus and John's talking about Cleveland, it doesn't mean that, we're the only ones looking there, right? There are hundreds of thousands of investors from the East Coast, from the West Coast, internationally, that are investing throughout the country. So, I know Chris is big on, you don't have to leave your backyard. I don't care where you live. You just got to understand what you're looking to accomplish, and then find the place where you believe that's going to be. And that could be in your backyard. It could be out of state. But, Columbus has just been, it's been a really good market for us. I bought a property there in 2014, and we've been investing there basically over the last 6 years. And it's been, it's been a very solid market.
It's a cool conversation, guys, about the backyard, because I think we both agree, if you want to get started, start in your backyard and learn the fundamentals and be prepared to, everyone's you're not going to crush your first deal. And I said, well, look for the average over 5, make 5 your goal, not 1 year goal. And then see how you turn out. But the backyard and the local team, everyone knows someone that knows someone in real estate. I'd be shocked if you didn't.
That was the hardest. I've said this before on this podcast, offline. The hardest thing going outside of New York, because I was a broker here for quite some time, whether, on the residential side, on the commercial side, rental, sales, whole 9 yards. And when I first started at, that first rental sales job in Manhattan, I remember, there was people that just worked Tribeca. There were people that just worked the Upper East Side. And I was like, oh, I could do it all. And you try. But then you realize when you have to go from a showing on the Upper East Side to a showing in Tribeca, it takes you an hour and 45 minutes to get there. You lose a ton of time. And just being an expert in a location, you get branded that way. So you're the go-to for that. So when I was going out of state, out of the box, I picked 10 markets, and then I whittled it down to 3, and then I focused on 3. But then when I finally got there, I realized you could be on the west side, the east side, the north side, the south side. And just because you found this great deal that looks attractive and it checks off every box, you needed a handgun and an armored car to get your rent. So you're like, wait a second, that's probably not where I want to be. So being a local expert and starting in your backyard is a great way, because you're going to learn the fundamentals of how to find submarkets and locations. Then you just take that fundamental and you can extrapolate that, 200, 400, 1,000 miles away, whatever it is, and the fundamentals don't change. But starting in your backyard, it's a lot easier to wake up, roll out of bed, and drive around than it is to wake up, underwrite 20 deals, get on a plane, and realize they're all crap. So I agree 100%. I think everyone should at least give it a shot. Doesn't mean you have to buy something, but you want to be an expert, and you want to know how to take that, exercise of becoming an expert and go bring that to another location.
So yeah, it's back to opportunities probably around the corner if you start looking for it, and I'm sure one of the goals you guys have for your show is to get people off of the sidelines and into the game, right?
100%.
Yeah, I think one thing I want to clarify is, we talk about backyard and out of state, and don't be so quick to go out of state. I really think people, especially if you're starting, you should be looking at your backyard first and analyzing the market and trying to figure out why it doesn't work for you before you go out of state. There's no bad reason. I mean, there is, but there's nothing wrong, with going out of state, out of market, another country, whatever. I just always worry that because of social media and publicity and things of that nature, that people are too quick to leave their market because they hear, oh, the Midwest is a great place to be. Oh, Florida is a great place to be. Okay, but why? And why can't you do it in your own backyard? Because there's something to be said that you lose when you go out of state versus doing it in your backyard. The ability to drive to your property at any single time to go check out what's going on and how the people running it are doing it, and are, your tenants throwing trash out their window, or are they putting in the dumpster? Are they putting it next to the dumpster? How does it look at 2:00 on a Friday versus 2 a.m. on a Tuesday? I can't do that. I have to rely on other people. So for me, when you are starting this and you're looking at markets, you should always start looking at your backyard or very close, because when you go too far, you don't have that option anymore. So if you can have that option and find something that works for you, it shouldn't be undervalued. And I think people are too quick to dismiss it or undervalue that capability.
I agree.
It's a great point. John, well, at one point you had a real estate license in New York. I mean,
Yep.
Chris, are you an agent?
No,
I mean, I think I'm not promoting that everyone goes out to their local real estate school and become an agent, but I mean, it's a good, quick education, and you're going to meet so many people that you know, like I have a friend that's moving from, you know, he's making the move from one city down south to another. And he's looking at all these things. He's been in professional sales and in food and beverage his whole life. He's a rock star. He can sell anything to anybody. And he's looking for he's workshopping, bouncing the ideas off me. And I said, that you're looking for a quick fix. I said, you got to start small. I said, while you have some time on your hands, get a real estate license. And then you will meet everybody by going to a couple of events. And then you'll find the contractors, you'll find the lenders, you'll learn about how money lending. I mean, it's all right there, whether you have a license or not. But I mean, those events, you know, on Meetup or through your local RIA or anything are right there for anybody to go to. It's just a matter of going, which is hard right now because we can't go many places. And that in itself is a challenge, right? But I mean, the opportunity to go meet people just like yourself or just a little bit farther down the track than you or the experts, you want to meet all those folks, and you know, that is just a matter of, you know, 10 minutes of research and putting it on your calendar.
I agree. I think it's a great way to get started. I mean, there's nothing, people ask me all the time, you know, should I get a license or not? And I said, well, it depends what you're looking to accomplish. But bottom line in real estate, whether you're doing multifamily, industrial, commercial, development, you have to tour property. And the people that have access to the most property are real estate agents because there's MLSs and listing services. So just getting that will allow you to access them. It's easier to tour properties as a realtor than it is as a buyer that's never going to buy. Because especially today when, you know, do I want to go show a house to someone that has no intentions of buying it? Probably not. But as an agent, there's that opening of the door. So do I say people should get it? Well, that's not my decision. But as far as a networking tool and getting out there and, you know, to Chris's point, you know, if you got your license, you know, go tour, you know, 30 open houses or go drive 30 properties and get into them. You're going to see shit. And bottom line is to do any type of real estate investing, you got to see product and see inventory and get an idea. And having a license helps. Does having a license matter? Yes and no. But it does give you an automatic networking platform. And this business is about networking. So if that's the ticket to networking, do it. And then use all the other options that are available as well. So I think that was, you know, an awesome point for anyone starting and to get off the sidelines and get your shit to gear. You know, you got to do something. So I think it's an awesome place. I mean, that's a great piece of advice for anyone, you know, just, you know, getting their feet wet.
If that's something you think you'd want to do, I'll add that in there. It's not for everybody. Some people do not like, because it comes with picking up the phone and calling people and hearing people say no. You know,
that's for sure.
But that's also good resilience training if you're going to be in this game as a career.
Learn the word no and realize that that's 90% of what happens.
Figure out what you want to do. Reverse engineer it a way to get your foot in the door. And figure it out. You know, it's not that difficult. An agent's just a very easy and popular way to do it because it's pretty abundant, pretty easy to do, pretty easy to get started. So definitely a good piece of advice. But I think that's a great place to wrap up. John, thank you so much for coming on and, you know, sharing your story and your experience and everything with people listening. If somebody wants to learn more about you, follow along, get in touch with you, how do they do all that?
Cool. You know, you can I'm on Facebook and, you know, I connect with people there. I also have a podcast, the Real Estate Locker Room Show. It's available everywhere that people can, you know, follow along on. I'd be grateful if you did that. And johncarneyonline.com. I'm rebuilding it now. I'm not even sure what status it is, but there's an opt-in there. And I don't really blast a list because, you know, I'm in this really to add value in network and meet folks like yourself that are doing great things and are in Brooklyn which is a pretty cool place. It was my last stop before lockdown. I was in Brooklyn with some friends from New York, and I'm pretty easy to find. So if people want to email me, you can email me direct at jc@johncarneyonline.com, and I'll get back to you. Facebook, send me a DM to my author page, and then, or opt into the website, and I'll track you down that way.
Beautiful. Guys, definitely go check him out. Lots of great stuff. Don't judge him for the status of his website if it's not yet updated, but definitely go hit him up and follow along. And thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of the podcast. If you liked it and you're not already subscribed, it would mean the world to John and I if you would do so. And if you are subscribed, please send it to someone who you think would get a tremendous amount of value from this episode or this podcast. John, once again, thank you for coming on, man. Can't thank you enough.
Oh, you guys are awesome. I had a lot of fun, Chris and John. And look, if Cleveland's ever on your radar, or you get stuck here, drop me a line and we'll hook up and talk real estate, I suppose. But all the best. And if there's anything I can do to help you guys out or anyone on your team, just holler.